and the ground UAV systems too are in his control. So first we'll be speaking about, we'll have 3 blocks actually, and first we would like to speak about the Ukrainian militech in Ukraine. And my first question goes to Anna Gvazdar. What is the role that you see? What's happening on behalf of the state nowadays to contribute to the development of militech? Take a helicopter view of our situation as is. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for this question. So what is militech for us? What does it mean? This refers to all defense technologies we have. We regard it in 3 dimensions. The first one being security one. Without an exception, all of the industries that we are developing are all to serve the safety and security of our people and to have our military. So it's a lot of money, lots of cycles, lots of focus riveted to that on behalf of the businesses who would like to contribute to our victory. So number 1 is to provide for our army, and number 2, it's an economic dimension. Localization for us matters a lot. We care to make sure that as many things are produced in Ukraine as we can, because all of our taxes go to equipment for the sake of our army. So the more funds remain here in Ukraine, the more we can contribute to ensuring the needs of our army. And dimension 3 is a political one. From the charity standpoint, because we are kind of a country who is donated to. All of the countries contributed with their weaponry for Ukraine, but now we are beginning to export our technologies. So in this respect, we are becoming a partner. So for us, what matters, of course, is our army, which deserves its full right to raise a loud voice and to speak out loud on the map of security of the whole world. And the second thing, it's defense tech, because we are a partner. We have a lot of expertise that many of our partners don't have. So a lot of our European peers are reaching out to us because they have been confronted with the Russian drones. They're not talking to us as a country which is a poor country attacked by Russians, but they're talking to us as a strong partner, a partner with unique expertise from the standpoint of defense technologies. So these are the 3 dimensions via the lens of which the government is assessing militech. Just before this panel, producers usually, they stand and begin to complain. It's a classic story. It's not only before this panel, but as a rule, this is the way it happens. So the standpoint of the MOD, where are the problems now? What are the most critical issues, the biggest bottlenecks from the perspective of the state? And how are the producers viewed, and how are they viewing this? Well, as for me, our biggest problem is the Russians. I always say to everyone about it in response to such questions. Our only issue is the Russians, but for them, everything would be much different. So this is problem number 1. Problem number 2 is funds. If our country was not faced with the problems that we have to face now, and if we didn't have to spend money for things where this money goes to, of course, we would invest much more in defense technologies. Our R&D is vested on the shoulders of our manufacturers. So we're talking about collaboration. It's not so much about the country versus producers, but about the whole country. And I thank all of the producers and manufacturers who are allowed to leave some more profit than other producers of weaponry. And we can see a real breakthrough taking place in the production. We do not dictate or impose it on the producers, do this or that. Once we see any issues, and I think the military will speak about that more, but once we begin to look for solutions, they are available in the market as a rule, and this is great. But I think if we had more money, we would definitely be able to afford more developments. Now much is being said about various models of funding, like SAFE, Danish model, the second version of the Danish model. Where are we in all that? Personally, I also engage in negotiations. It's moving along. There's some positive shift observed. But how is the MOD viewing that? Are you ready to facilitate this dialogue? Where do you see the success or challenges? The MOD And of course, the supreme authority of the country are the core negotiators with the leaders of other countries in terms of funding Ukraine's, for the purposes of Ukraine's weaponry. Just for you to understand, 2 years ago, we were never provided with any foreign funding to procure any weaponry made in Ukraine. They were only ready to forward some of the equipment they had. And I think it's also a hallmark of quality that 1.5 years ago, partners began to give us funds, and this is how we elaborated the Danish model, and we began to procure directly from the Netherlands, and now the SAFE project has come. Our partners will take out loans, and they will be using it towards buying weaponry produced here in Ukraine. And here at the MOD is the core negotiator, and all of this lies on the shoulders of the military. We know how much they need and what exactly they need for the next year, and we immediately begin to make our requests based on that. Thank you. Now let's move on to manufacturers. Let's start with Alexander Yakovenko. My question is, you began with prototypes, and now you're into serial mass production. So what is the greatest hitch when we speak about mass production in Ukraine? Just to keep it short, everything is a big problem. And I thought that you would say the Russians. Of course, the Russians are number one due to shellings, for example. But speaking about the problems at every stage, every step of the way, there are different problems. We began this business not as a business, but rather as a charity organization. And only a year after that, we realized that it was impossible to meet the needs of the army and the country as a charity organization. So we transformed that in a systemic organization. We went through all kinds of mistakes, and the military will probably confirm that. You spoke about us moving from prototypes to mass making, right? Because this is the greatest number of challenges that we can see with prototype makers. This is something which is our strength, because they can scale up. I mean, the enemy can scale up their solutions. In Ukraine, there are not just 15 or 20 products like the cases with Russia, but we have so many more, but we simply cannot make them massively produced. So this is something that we are faced with on a massive scale. At the first stage, initially, we produced as all we could, but we were very much limited in the stock of our component parts, and there was no culture of production at the initial stage. What do I mean? When everything goes according to the same specification and everything is controlled. The second point is the supply chain. And Anna said it before me. Now the key issue is localization. One of the key things is localization. Why? Because from my example, 90% of acquisitions and procurements for our UAVs happen abroad, and primarily things come from China. More than that, we are the suppliers of different component parts for other suppliers, and last year we paid Chinese suppliers tentatively for $150 million. Only you mean, or is this the assessment of the market? Not the assessment of the market. It's the group of my companies that produces and sells to others for $150 million. This is crazy money. This year, there's another acute issue at stake, localization, because year in and out, it's getting ever harder to import component parts to Ukraine. Export from China or from other countries is getting harder, and importing this into Ukraine, right? Especially if we talk about Chinese equipment. Now it's getting easier due to the government's efforts. We are exempt from taxes, but we would like to diversify our risks, and we go for localization.
When it comes to localization, there are many relevant issues because, unfortunately, the raw materials is not accessible from the Ukrainian innate resources, so it needs to be taken from abroad. But step by step, we will need to diversify the supply chain. And of course, lastly, it's a quality control. We need to be accelerated in this regard. Everything is being updated every few weeks, and unfortunately, with the pressure like this, including with the constant shelling, where we need to constantly diversify the risk, to place accumulator production in one place and other parts in another place. This is what really impacts the quality control, and this is something for us to handle. But the systemic story is such that our country is a country that is a laboratory. We're perfect at creating prototypes. We're very quick to test them on the battleground, but the managerial story and the operational aspects are something that needs to be constantly upgraded. Talking about scaling up, during the conference of the European Council, Andriy Beletsky stated that the Russians have not invented anything during this war. They also took something that was invented before by the Iranians or Ukrainians. They copied it and scaled it up. So we see this approach to scaling today. What is the factor that's impeding scaling up? You have listed the directions of your operations, your activities, and how do you see the solutions to the obstacles that you mentioned, or what are you doing in this regard? First of all, the obstacle that is the limited funds. It is something that can only be resolved along with the state and bringing in new partners. So this is number one. And then secondly, it's the regulatory framework. The state is rather quick in recalling the limitations. As we saw a few years ago, to get the verification, it took 3 years. Now it takes 3 months, and it is critically important. Then we need to scale up the opportunities for testing the products on the training grounds. There is a certain bottleneck there, where we need to wait, where we are detained by the air alerts and so on. So this is something that can be accelerated. And of course, we need to simplify the regulatory framework for it to not, of course, remove the quality control, but in order to be able to implement new solutions. Thank you, Stanislav Grishin. Can I ask a question to you? In continuation to what was said by Alexander, you are growing so fast, the demand to your products is very active. Tell us your story about your story of scaling. We have here 2 producers that are scaling. Do you support what was said by Alexander, or do you have a separate story? Let me totally agree to what Alexander said. Of course, we had our peculiarities and our certain stories, but in general, if we're talking about scaling on the one part and the quality control, it is actually mutually exclusive factors. It is impossible to work on the quality and scale up and also do the R&D efforts. Yes, of course, it's totally combinable in terms of processes, because they do not go together very well. I am fully convinced that the issues of scaling, it lies in the ground of strategic planning. And the ball is on the side of the MOD, and we support all of the positive innovations introduced and described by Ms. Anna. And talking about the new products, we do lack certain communication. Which product, in the opinion of MOD, has a potential? We can compare that to voodoo style management. So we do have certain ideas. We invest certain funds, and as well as other producers. We create prototypes. We do the testing. We do mass production. If it works, then this is where Ministry of Defense gets engaged as a strategic partner, and this is when the process truly starts with the procurement, the demand, and so on. And does the military experience impact the decision making regarding the favoring a certain product or prototype or the product evolution. Is it done by the military units or the MOD? I'm just doing this introduction to then bring in Igor into this discussion. Well, absolutely, it's the military units as well. Everyone that's engaged, every actor that's engaged in the Ministry of Defense, in the defense sector, their client is not only the Ministry of Defense, but more and primarily the end user, which is the military, and the operational processes need to be designed in real time. We constantly request and get feedback, and we need to be prepared to take a pivot in terms of our products and be prepared to the shifts and be prepared to the constant dynamics. I believe that this process from the operational perspective is so dynamic despite the fact that it's really young. Well, it's true that Miltech existed before 2022, but the greatest boost happened and is happening now. Therefore, there are no right answers, no wrong answers. It is a living process. And what is the secret to the success of your product in terms of being implemented by the armed forces? There is no secret to it. There is a lot of work involved. We have a joke where we used to have work-life balance, and now there's war-life balance. There is no 9 to 5 or 5-hour, 5-day work week. There's a lot of work involved. We need to be open to constant changes. We are very open to engaging veterans and introducing them into our team. The operational director of our team is one of the commanders of the military brigades, and he's now with us, and it really adds to our capacities. And absolutely, yes, the military experience can be different, and it can be the administrative work, because military bureaucracy is also a separate aspect. All of this matters, and it's a combination of factors that it strengthens the potential of the product. Igor, let us give the floor to you. We have now listened to two producers speak and the Ministry of Defense. Now we want to give you a chance to speak. What are the frontline realities? What are the expectations of the people in the military, in the front line, from the Ministry of Defense and the producers? Let me start by saying thank you to both the MOD and the producers. We are using your products along with others. These drones are amazing. They work, they're very reliable, and really we are proud of the work that you do. We're proudly using your products. Please scale up. We need more of this stuff. Now, let me admit that from the state, it's similar to money. So there's always lack of money. The same, there's always lack of supply from the state. We do have supply. It's diversified. We have drones coming from various producers and suppliers, but of course, it looks something similar to a zoo, because there is the infrastructure is, for example, best suited for a specific product, and when you have a zoo, this a span of various products, there is difficulty in terms of changing the certain internal infrastructure of the unit, personnel, and the mini infrastructure and the elements. So it is additional hassle, so to say. But generally speaking, I'm sure that everybody is aware of that, but it is a phenomenon, really, how we were able, using FPV drones and the Starlink UAVs, they are also referred to as vampires. They have really changed the image of this war, and made a historical impact on this war. Cannot imagine what would have happened if we did not make this good progress in terms of drone production. And it is the the state that deserves the credit for this to begin with, because those workshops were starting out in a backstreet format, so to say, and it was largely inspired by the spirit. And as when it comes to the state, I want to highlight the development of the digital services and the supply services. There's a platform that's called Brave Market. I'm sure that the producers are familiar with it. Well, actually, it's curious to know how our international partners regard this. It's inconceivable how gamification can be introduced in the state of war. Yeah, so there are the scores for ruined object, and so to say, and every unit for their based on their results, you see the results in the mass media, the list of top brigades, and so on. So it is this electronic scores that are the foundation for the statistics, and using these scores, you can use them as cash, so to say. You can exchange them for certain products. You can make 15 million of virtual funds that you can then exchange to certain products. This is a beautiful story, and it's working so well. I would be happy if the state actually shifted supply to this kind of market platform where you can choose, you can do the configuration and order what you need, and assure the supply, structure the supply in this way. So the state would be the leading agent for these services and these policies, similar to Delta and others, and it would be very useful to really invest time and effort into assuring the supply to the front line, to make sure it's more client-oriented to the specific brigade, to the specific military. If this continues and if it expands, it would be very helpful. If you can share with us the degree of supply for specifically your unit, MOD and those that do fundraising, they talk a lot about this. Can you share to what degree your demand is covered? I don't think it's secret for classified information. We are the supply is 100% every month, but not all of the 100% are provided by the state. So the funding is not sufficient, as stated by Anna. Yes, it's true that for 1 month it could be 20% by the state provided, and another month it could be different, and because there was some delay because of the bureaucratic processes, and we did sense it on the front line. But due to the support and the donations and the support from the part of the business and the fundraising efforts on behalf of the units themselves, it's openly open marketing events, because we are all aware about the 3rd Assault Brigade and others. They have very powerful fundraising initiatives, and it is a really good avenue for both recruiting and supply into the brigade. Thank you. Dmytro, may we ask you the following? The subject of humanitarian demining is pushed back when we are talking about drones, but I know that in humanitarian demining a lot of drones are being used. Can it be regarded as a separate industry, or is it part of the defense stack, and how do you see its development? Of course, humanitarian demining is part of the defense stack, but it's time has not come. It has started developing in 2022 when the decision was taken that it is not just the obligation of the state, and Yulia Serdenko, Ihor Beskaravaini made this decision, and this sphere started growing, but people were hoping that the war will last for 1 year. But we cannot call this a market that's growing, although there are many operators, 100 operators of humanitarian demining. We are now at the stage where our manufacturers produce the special machinery and the special gear for humanitarian demining. The KIEF region, as of now, has been demined already, and regarding the other areas, we will see where the war stops. As of now, the market of humanitarian demining cannot use the same budget, the same funds as the drone market. But we need to understand that there are some red lines in France that are still not demined since the Second World War, because it's expensive, and we can see it in the training grounds. We're currently testing the new technologies that new Ukrainian companies come forward with, and whoever finds a way to do demining in a quick and more efficient way, those will just harvest millions, because this can be then sold to France and Germany and so on, because the German grounds are not fully demined. So as of now, the cost of demining the contaminated territories in Ukraine to cover 1 hectare, it would be $7,000, and when the cost of the land is 1,500. So nobody wants to really do it out of profit. And mentioning Croatia as an example, they're still working on the demining, and their machinery is one of the best sold in Europe because they're cheaper. The 700,000 compared to 100,000 in other places in Europe. So I do believe in the export potential of this direction. Talking about us, SHYMKIV, we are currently focused on the following. We have learned how to manage people. We actually funded the appearance of a new profession. It's the deminer of the humanitarian sphere. The Ministry of Education is already licensing education in this regard. We have trained 100 people already, and if and the deminer can also be an amputee. We have calculated, along with the Ministry of Economy and the market of this profession, those that will be engaged will include 10 or 20,000 people. So we are now preparing to expand the network of training centers in all the regions where there were hostilities. This is amazing. So you really made this subtle introduction to the next sphere. It's the warfare technologies in the global context. You mentioned export. Anna, can we touch upon the very favorite subject? Will Ukraine be exporting? Will it be Model A, Model B, Model C? In the a chat of producers, there was diverging opinions. Can you please share where are we in this subject, and how does the MOD see this process? Well, we can say that we can call it a victory already, because a week ago, on the 6th of October, the president declared the launch of guided export. The various factors came together. First of all, it's our limited funding and our manufacturing capacities. For example, to be able to buy off everything that my fellow panelists are producing, we do not have sufficient funds, and because they are really worth a lot. Therefore, we understand that in order to be able to help our army, in order to supply for them, we need to sell a few things that we have in abundance and those that are in demand with our partners. We see the risks that our partners are facing, and some factors have led to the president declaring this decision. But in the center of this decision, of course, there are our militaries. It, of course, needs to be done in their interest, and they need to understand that we do it in order to increase the the quantity of supply. And of course, there is some benchmark threshold level of supply to a brigade where we call it capable. Is this something that was mentioned already?
In Kharkiv, there is a great case of how they're helping themselves. But we understand there are some new units which cannot always make acquisitions for themselves, even having the funds that the government provides them with. So they always have to live up, we have to live up to the level of our military to make sure that they can fulfill all of their missions. And exporting is one of the pathways that we have to pursue to make sure that the residues can be sold towards helping our army in order to make some profits. Now, together with the ministries, with the National Defense and Security Council, we will be working on a model which will be safe for our producers in the first place, will meet the needs of our military, and will contribute as much money as it can. So this is cause number one. Number two, this will tap into our investment potential, because a lot of international investors come and they want to invest in our Ukrainian companies, and this will definitely give a great boost to our companies to keep developing technology-wise and contribute to the frontline gains and wins. But no foreign investor will come to a market where conditions and terms are vague, especially when we speak about our procurement capacity. So the decision is right and timely. There is the political will in place, you mean? Yes. The mechanism is just taking the shape of a mechanism, yes. And we are very much hopeful that in the nearest future it will be launched into operation and we will secure some of the first deals and this will roll over. Now, a grain of salt, a pinch of salt. We are talking about successful Ukrainian technologies which are demonstrating themselves very well in the battlefield. But by your assessments, there have been a lot of discussions at the level of MODs in other countries, and you're engaged in them, and you're contributing a lot to that. There's no denying this. Your story with Sergei Pritula and the strategic fields in the Ministry of Strategic Industries. So this is a matter of compliance with STANAGs and NATO standards. How much are we prepared before we begin to ask the producers whether we are ready? Because the requirements set before us from the procurers of NATO countries will be the requirements of those countries. And we definitely mean to export to those countries where the regulatory basis is very lean and simple to understand. So, Anya, what do you have to say? Well, let's face it. I'm not going to answer your question at once. We have to come to terms, and the whole world have to come to terms, that the world tech industry has changed due to different kind of decisions that Ukraine has been undertaking. We are demonstrating that. For you to understand, before the full-scale invasion, this was a very complicated, very expensive industry. I mean, military tech, everything was extremely costly and not affordable to everyone. And suddenly Ukraine emerged with streamlined regulation, so anyone virtually could become a producer of weaponry and equipment just because they were willing to do so. This is not a super accessible and available possibility in the world, so it's cheaper. Our producers, of course, they're making money, and secondly, their production needs to fulfill missions in the battlefield. It has to be interchangeable and provide the deliverables. And of course, the cheaper it is, the better. Respectively, we're used to some things, while the world is looking at us askew in a way, askance. Why? Because the global trends say that you cannot manufacture a lot of artillery platforms, but we produce as many as 40 per month. All of the countries in the world produce only 10, so this is another world trend. You cannot produce several million FPV drones per year. It's impossible. Or reconnaissance drones, like 50,000 produced here in Ukraine. And here, clearly, the issue of certification of how long these goods should be preserved, about support services. In this context, of course, we are not ready to face the situation. But if the world wants to survive it has to change because our partners, seeing how much weaponry, world-made, Western-made weaponry, unfortunately, went down the drain and it failed in the battlefield. So we have to understand whether NATO has to integrate with us or we have to integrate into NATO. So we have to live up to some standards, and understandably, especially our manufacturers have to be aware of how to survive in weapon-making markets. And at the same time, we have to understand that concessions have to be made on their part. They have to revise their standards. Thank you very much for your active MOD stance, because we see that arms making standards are shifting and very quickly. So, Alexander, next question. Which weapon products are of greatest enjoy the greatest prospects? Because you have a wide range of products to make. So what is boding the greatest export potential for us? Thank you for your question. Let me first comment on the previous speaker's answers. As someone who was born in a democratic country, no, I wasn't born in a democratic country. It was back in the Soviet days, but I now live in a democratic country, so I'm very cautious when I hear guided exports, controlled exports. For me, everything which is guided or controlled is a tough story because, unfortunately, it entails a lot of bureaucracy. So I would like it to be done step by step for the country to deregulate exports too. Concerning our export capacity, I'll be frank with you. My take is probably 97% of manufacturers are not ready to go for compliance procedure according to NATO standards. It's virtually impossible. There is a ratio, a share of companies that stand very good chances. What do foreign MODs or private military companies want? In fact, they do not understand themselves what they want. It's weird, and as weird as it may be, but this is the situation. We can see it in Poland 3 years into the Ukrainian war, but still, they would like to see strike drones having no additional equipment as light systems to accompany those. So what is our potential in this respect? Naturally, the battlefield experience that we have right now speaks in favor of our expertise in terms of deep strikes, something that no one else has it except, unfortunately, our enemy. And this is the story that a lot of foreign partners take a lot of keen interest in. Lots of guided munitions, indeed. FPV drones, it's a basic thing, but they will be definitely changing, and we will be shifting for automated systems. We'll be shifting into those. And I think that in the nearest years, if unfortunately hostilities will continue at the same intensity, we will reach a particular ceiling, a cap of counteracting drones, and probably automated systems will be used for the most part that don't have any telemetry, no radiation or emission. Some of the systems have been prohibited by convention, so we cannot use them without the corroboration of the operator. But I think this is going to be amended because we can see how different international regulations are fulfilled. Well, Russia is a signatory to a lot of those regulations, but this unfortunately is not changing our situation or changing it for the better. So definitely we have to lobby it through different unions. Of course, we have to communicate that via our country, communicating this to MODs of our foreign partners concerning their concepts at large. So they have to integrate weaponry, and we have to do the same, which has short life, but is inexpensive in maintenance and support. And this can be a very good contribution to air defense systems, for example, interceptor drones. This is a must-have for any country as an intrinsic part of their air defense systems. All right, I see. Stanislav. Now that we're talking about competition, Alexander has said about the areas and trends How do you see this competition with large defense concerns? It's not a secret that the biggest stands at DSCI in London are usually presented by big manufacturing concerns. Usually they also set up concerts. It's a lot of show-off, which misfires. But at the same time, there are Ukrainian producers who are ready to compete. So how do you see this competition? First of all, let me thank Igor and his charter, the entire charter brigade, because our goods would be of no use but for the military personnel who use them on a daily basis, hitting the enemy and defending us. And on behalf of all of those present in this room, we should extend our gratitude to the armed forces of Ukraine in his capacity for their daily work. With regard to the competition, I'm deeply convinced. Kirill Budanov, our secret guest today, said that everything depends on us. In fact, Ukraine is a raw material colony because what we supply as exports are very basic, simplistic things. It just so happens historically. And as Kirill Budanov said it, arms are the best things that we have created since the time of gaining independence. So respectively, what we are doing is of exceptional significance in comparison to what our partners are doing, because it can be immediately applied in the battle, and it's of huge value. And the truth lies in the fact that this is not going to continue endlessly, because the conflict will end sooner or later. And the significance of that will also subside. So our solutions or decisions in exports, of course, it's great. This is going to be regulated, guided, and controlled. And we very much hope that it will be launched into operation sooner rather than later, because these complicated technologies will define and determine our economic specialty as a country. And this will define the strategic development for us, not as a company or a field or as an industry, but as an entire country. And this will eventually pull up all of the related industries, as we have mentioned it today. Things which is development of the component part production, which is very much related to drone making. So we have to be ready to produce them here, not only utilize them being exported from abroad. So this will entail a lot of changes, and we will have to repeal lots of taxes for the raw materials to be able to produce all of these components, and all of the related parts of the economy will be stirred into action. So we mustn't be afraid of some imaginary competition, but instead we have to brace up for that. That's something that we keep repeating at different nationwide and foreign events. We are very well committed. Our foreign partners and their employees work perhaps some 8 hours per day, and they can never overload themselves, whereas we are ready to work until the bitter end, which is the victory. Another thing to add, an interesting story before I move on to Igor. The degree of interaction between the Ukrainian manufacturers and Ukrainian military is unprecedented, something which is not experienced in NATO countries. For them, it was odd that the military servicemen are present during R&D and in workshops. And from this, I would like to make a bridge to Victor. Can Ukrainian military innovations be of interest for other countries? And other representatives of foreign ministries or different armies present and gaining any experience from you, because the issue of application is also of concern. Well, in the first place, in terms of engagement, this was back in 2022-2023 when we would go to KIEF, to different flats, to see different engineers sitting and soldering different pieces of equipment, gadgets, sitting down with them, trying to make something that would fly and kill someone. So this engagement and involvement was generated at this point. Probably this is part of our cultural genetic code of our resistance, and volunteering movement is all about the same. Concerning what may be of interest for international producers and how engaged they are. There are famous drones of Western make that already have an AI component fed in them. And they stand out because they have digital cameras, another type of communications, another way of applying them. They are also FPV drones. They fly perhaps further than ours, but they're not massively exploited because the degree of being merged with the Ukrainian producer here in the Ukrainian army is so much higher and more intense than the degree of interacting with foreign makers. In the third world countries, for example, where labor force is cheap, they go there, and for obvious reasons, they don't want to come to Ukraine. Although if they wanted, they probably could come here, but there were legal bans for them to come here and start manufacturing and exporting. So they produce their weapons abroad. Only here they set up some services centers, maintenance centers, and they have some engineers who try to twinkle with those AI elements and stuff like this. So this is the most successful of the cases that I know of. But in the final count, enjoying the full support, I am in favor of supporting the Ukrainian producer. And I'm 2 thumbs up to make sure that Ukrainian producers will be able to export their products and make money and invest that in their own manufacture. While foreign makers, they probably should be allowed to come here, take up a share, but the first fiddle must be played by the Ukrainian producer because these are our technologies, we are the inventor. Igor, quite often we mention exporting products, but it's also about experience. The experience of the Ukrainian military. You think that they can teach Western military how to apply this MilTech? Your experience of your subordinates, how do you see that? That perhaps in future, in theory, they can become instructors to Westerners. How do you see this story? Because often they mention manufacturers, but not you. Well, it's an indelible part. FPV drones, take them. In the last 2 years, they haven't changed, not substantially. Of course, the culture of manufacturing has improved, and the frequencies to manage them, video capacities, changing batteries, the content of the drone changes in a way, but the drone itself hasn't changed much. It's a device which is not difficult to make, as opposed to other military technologies, but without the tactics of applying that. Any Ukrainian drone needs to be supported by a Ukrainian FPV pilot or commander, who is not just a pilot, but also a commander who knows well how to apply those gadgets. If just a year ago we had a range of products which were just analog FPV drones, right now we can see lots of different specificities attached to them. We have as many as 10 different pieces to accompany a particular FPV drone. So it's a combined operation where we use 2, 3, or 4 different types of FPVs to achieve the maximum output. So this expertise, once again, is an indelible part of this would-be expertise to export. Okay, Dmytro, to follow up on that. The Ukrainian exporters, the prospects of exporting expertise and knowledge. I understand private military companies are reaching out to us, not for D-miners, but for sappers. Yet, one needs to understand where there is a great potential for the things that the boys are doing. I'm not only talking about FPV drones. Sheriff will be participating in the month of November in the French Expo. The logic is, previously we defended commercial assets. We would set up different kinds of systems to defend the perimeters of assets. But now we're asked with the task of air defenses. And now we have to understand that any company, world company, which is worth millions of dollars, its operations can be put on stall by a single drone. So they're coming to us for solutions. And these days, our company is getting together with DIA Defense to collect a group who will build those that detect drones, EW and interceptor drones, but to apply that in conventionally peaceful circumstances, right? Where we need to prevent attacks. So our and engineering area is going to continue developing. We will be applying our engineering devices in order to defend critical industry assets in Europe, and this is going to be presented, as I said, in November in France. Super great. Today we have engaged in a fascinating discussion. We tried to have insights into the export potential of the Ukrainian defense tech industry. And we can argue that due to the Ukrainian experience, Ukrainian armed forces, Ukrainian producers and manufacturers, we are creating a story which is transforming the landscape of the army of the future, the new arms race, because to a large extent a new history is being created here in Ukraine by producers, by the people who are using and applying all of this gadgetry. And I'm grateful to the General Staff Ministry of Defense and the commands of many units, because the level of involvement of them, their involvement in this process is unprecedented. Thank you. Talking about the transformation of FPV drones, I haven't seen it, but I was told about the latest battlefield. So they already have FPV drones. So this is to do with gaming culture. Now this needs to be ensured in reality. We can go on. We can see that our time is up, but there are some security issues. And SHYMKIV has raised this issue with us here. This is to do with protecting civilian population from FPV drones that might be applied by criminal gangs. And this is within the purview of the Ministry of Interior. This has been on their agenda for a long time. This is an issue that was raised at a lot of commercial exhibitions for drones, and there are no solutions to this issue. Most of the time when we ask our audiences about possible solutions, there's always still. So it's a great comfort for me that we are developing our defense tech to ensure our own security. Thank you.